Assalamu alaikum. Today we will start to talk about the blood, especially about the physiology of the blood. In this lecture we will focus on the red blood cell, functions, characteristics, genesis, and regulation of its production. What is the composition of the blood? The blood consists of the plasma and the blood cells. اشني البلازما واشني هي البلد سيلز. هاي عندنا سامبل اوف ذا بلد، عملنا له سنترفيوج نسمينه طرد مركزي، فكانت النتيجة 3 layers. زين this dark layer هي red blood cells، خلايا كريات الدم الحمر. زين والطبقة الوسطية نسميها البافي كوت، هي تتألف من الوايت بلاد سيل كريات الدم البيض and platelets الصفائح الدموية. والطبقة العليا هاي الفينت يلو نسميها البلازما. Okay. Now what are the types of the blood cells? We have 3 types of the blood cell as follow. Red blood cell, which abbreviate as RBC. Red blood cell can called also erythrocyte. Secondly, white blood cells, which abbreviate as WBC. Also, the white blood cell can be called as leukocytes. Third type of the blood cell is platelet, or we can call it as thrombocytes. This is the red blood cells, this is white blood cell, and this is platelet. In this lecture we will focus on the red blood cells. What are the major functions of the red blood cells? First of all, red blood cells have hemoglobin. This hemoglobin is so important in carrying oxygen from the lungs to the tissue. Secondly, red blood cells contain large quantity of an enzyme which is called carbonic anhydrase enzyme. This enzyme will increase the rate of the reaction ما بين الكربون dioxide and the water, forming carbonic acid several thousand times. Why this point is important? This point is important in order that to transporting CO2 in the form of the bicarbonate ion from the tissue to the lungs. Both the first point and second point will راح نشرح لكم in detail في محاضرات respiratory lectures. Third, the hemoglobin in the red blood cell also play an important role in the acid base buffer، وأيضا راح أشرح لكم هي إن شاء الله في محاضرات acid base balance. Shape and size of the red blood cells. Normally the shape of the red blood cells are biconcave disc، يعني مقعرة. Its mean diameter equal to the 7.8 micrometer, and it is thickness at the thickest point equal to the 2.5 micrometer, while at the center its thickness equal to the 1 micrometer or less. This shape of the red blood cell can change, especially when it will squeeze through the capillaries, but it will not rupture during stretching because the normal red blood cell has a great excess of the cell membrane. يعني هذا شكل red blood cell راح يتغير لما تمر كريات الدم الحمر خلال الكابيلاريز الشعيرات الدموية، لأن الشعيرات الدموية عندها دايمتر كلش قليل، فلما الار بي سي تمر بها راح يتغير شكله. زين، ولكنها ما راح يصير بها، وراح يصير بها stretching بس ما راح يصير بها rupture لأن الار بي سي have a great excess of the cell membrane. The average volume of the red blood cell equal to the 90 up to 95 cubic micrometers. وهذا شكل الار بي سي، شوفوا شلون مقعرة. زين، عيني هوني هاي البوينت is less thickness، هوني راح تكون more thickness، وهذا الدايمتر مالتها. Okay. Normally in the men the average number of the red blood cells per cubic millimeters is equal to the 5,200,000 plus minus 300,000, while in normal women it is about 4,700,000 plus minus 300,000 per cubic millimeter. What about the quantity of the hemoglobin in the cells in a person with a normal hematocrit and normal hemoglobin? In male, it's equal to the 15 grams of the hemoglobin per 100 milliliter of the cells, while in female it's equal to the 14 grams of hemoglobin per 100 milliliter of the cells. ولكن هناك نقطة أن ال RBC عند القابلية to concentrate hemoglobin إلى أعلى من ذلك, maximally up to 34 grams in each 100 milliliter of the cells. From where in the body this RBC will produce? In the early weeks of the embryonic life, the yolk sac will produce the primitive enucleated red blood cells, while during the middle trimester of the gestation, يعني الثاني 3 أشهر في حياة الجنين, mainly the liver will produce RBC in addition to the spleen and the lymph nodes, while in the last month of the gestation and also after the birth, the red blood cells will produce only in the bone marrow. Until the age of 5 years old, all the bone marrow of all bones, long bone and membranous bone, will produce red blood cells, while after about 20 years of age, the bone marrow of the long bones become fatty and does not produce red blood cells, except for the proximal portion of the humerus and tibia. Humerus عظام الكتف and tibia عظام legs الساق. Beyond 20 years old, the most RBC will produce in the marrow of the membranous bone. أشني الممبرينس bones؟ هي الفرتبرا، الفقرات، sternum، عظم القص، ribs، الأضلاع، إليا، عظم الحوض. Even in these bones, as age increases, the marrow will become less productive. يعني حتى بعد بهذه العظام أيضا إيش قد نتقدم بالعمر راح تقل كفاءتها in production of the red blood cell. Genesis or differentiation of the blood cells, مراحل تكون خلايا الدم. All the circulating blood cells derived from the one type of the cell which is called pluripotential hematopoietic stem cells, which is present in the bone marrow. As these cells produce the blood cell, a small portion of it remain as pluripotential cells in the bone marrow to maintain supplying of the blood cell on all life, but its number will reduce with age. These pluripotential hematopoietic cell will differentiate into another type of the cell which is called committed stem cells. These committed stem cells will give us the various type of the cell, RBC, white blood cell and platelets. These committed stem cells when culture it لمن يزرعوها راح تعطينا colony of the cells. إذا هذه الكوميتد سيل أعطتنا colony of the erythrocyte مجمع من الخلايا تؤدينا إلى خلايا ال RBC نسميها erythrocyte colony forming unit of the erythrocyte, وهكذا colony forming unit of the erythrocyte, and so here you will see the pluripotential hematopoietic cells راح تعطينا all the types of the blood cells, ويبقى جزء منها as plurihematopoietic stem cells, sorry, and this راح تعطينا الكوميتد سيلز. هذه الكوميتد سيلز مثل ما قلنا ما راح يعملوا لها كلتشر، اعطتنا اللي راح تعطينا erythrocyte نسميها colony forming unit for erythrocyte. اللي عطتنا granulocyte and monocyte سموها colony forming unit granulocyte and monocyte. اللي عطتنا ممكن تعطينا الليمفوسايت T and B type of the lymphocyte and so on. The growth and differentiation of the different types of the stem cells are controlled by both growth inducers and differentiation inducers. These inducers both are controlled by the factors which are outside the bone marrow. For example, the low oxygen will increase red blood cells, infection will increase white blood cells. Now we will talk about the stages of the red blood cells differentiation اللي نسميها erythropoiesis. The first cells that belong to the red blood cell اللي تجينا من ال committed stem cells is called pro-erythroblast. Pro-erythroblast هذه ال pro-erythroblast هي أول خلية تعود لل RBC differentiation stage of RBC differentiation. Okay, this pro-erythroblast will give us the basophil erythroblast اللي تكون تحتوي على nucleus and has basic dye هذا اللون to the blue. Okay, and have a few hemoglobin. After that, the generation go on until reach the reticulocyte, which has no nucleus, ما بها nucleus, and filled with the hemoglobin. شوفوا الكلر filled with the hemoglobin, but still contain slight basophilic blue قليل من البلو still contain slight basophilic material and contain a remnant of the Golgi apparatus and mitochondria. Now, at the stage of this reticulocyte, the reticulocyte will pass from the bone marrow into the blood capillaries by the process called diabetesis, which is the squeezing of this reticulocyte through the pores of the capillary membrane. And when the reticulocyte in the blood, within 1 to 2 days, this basophilic material will disappear, and then it will become mature erythrocyte, mature RBC, which has no nucleus and has hemoglobin. What is the role of the erythropoietin in the red blood cell production? The erythropoietin is the main stimulus for increasing red blood cells production rate, because erythropoietin formation will increase in response to any condition which lead to decreased oxygen transported to the tissue اللي نسميها hypoxia. Normally 90% of the erythropoietin is formed in the kidneys, while 10% only is formed in the liver. So in both kidney disease, the person will be very anemic due to the decreased red blood cell production اللي هي ليش decrease RBC production؟ لأنه الكدنيز بعد ما تقدر تكون لنا الإريثروبويتين، والإريثروبويتين ما يعمل لنا stimulation for increasing RBC production. What are the conditions that cause hypoxia and lead to increased formation of the erythropoietin? First of all types of the anemia. Secondly, destruction of the major portion of the bone marrow by the X-ray therapy. Third, low oxygen, for example, at the climate at very high altitude. في المرتفعات لما يصعدون الجبال بارتفاعات شاهقة. Decreased blood flow through the peripheral vessels especially to the lungs, and finally as in the lung disease. What is the role of the vitamin B12 and folic acid in the red blood cell genesis? Both of them are important for the synthesis of the DNA and in the final maturation of the red blood cells. So, lack of either vitamin B12 or folic acid will lead to a slow reproduction of the erythroblast in the bone marrow, and also maturation failure of the red blood cells production, leading to producing a large red blood cells which is larger than normal, which is called macrocytes. These macrocytes can carry oxygen normally, but they are very fragile, cause them to have a short lifespan, as about 1/2 to 1/3 of normal red blood cells lifespan. Lack of vitamin B12 or folic acid leading to type of anemia. This type of anemia called megaloblastic anemia. Normally, vitamin B12 is absorbed from the gastrointestinal tract and large amount will stored in the liver. And then only about 1 to 3 micrograms will released slowly as the bone marrow need. But when there is poor absorption of the vitamin B12 from the gastrointestinal tract due to the disease, this lead to the type of anemia which is called pernicious anemia. Now, what is the anemia? Anemia means red blood cells count are less than normal value. What is polycythemia? Polycythemia means red blood cells count is more than normal value. The lifespan of the red blood cells average of 120 days. 120 days. And thank you. Finally, we can conclude from this lecture that red blood cells transport hemoglobin, which carry oxygen from the lung to the tissue. Secondly, red blood cells are produced only in the bone marrow during the last month or so and after birth. Third, beyond 20 years old, most of the red blood cells are produced in the bone marrow of the membranous bone. Finally, erythropoietin is the main stimulus for increasing red blood cell production. Thank you for today.